Gurur Brahma, Gurur Vishnu, Gurur Devo Maheshwaraha, Gurureva Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Chinmayam Yati Yat Sarvam, Trilokyam Sacharacharam, Tatpadam Darshitam Yena, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Twameva Mata Shapita, Twameva Bandhuscha Sakha, Twameva Vedyat Ravidam, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva, Twameva Sarvam Mama Deva Deva. Jai Guru. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Matra Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Shakti Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Buddhi Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu Lakshmi Rupena Sanstita, Namastasyai, Namastasyai, Namastasyai Namo Namaha. So Adrian, we traditionally start, or I traditionally start, with 3 verses from a hymn, the Guru Stotram, the hymn to the Guru. And I do that in salutations to my teacher, Swami Chinmayananda. And the second chant is a Devi chant. We want to invoke the grace of the Divine Mother because this is a Devi text. So, Mark, will you remind us again where we are?
I believe it's page 377, number 42.
All right, Ganesh, can you help us out? We're in the middle of the story of where Brahmaji, the creator, has this conclave of all these various saints through time. They're arguing which way is the best. And then they go to Vishnu. Vishnu says, well, I'm not quite sure. Then they go to Lord Shiva, and he says, well, I'm not quite sure. So they all meditate and invoke the grace of Sri Tripuri, Sri Vidya, the goddess of wisdom herself, who says, what you're doing in the world isn't what it's about. It's your abidance in me, consciousness, which is the ground of everything. All right, going on.
Yatha yo mam bhavayati
Let me stop you real quickly, Ganesh. Adrian, the text is written in Sanskrit. So Ganesh is going to be chanting in Sanskrit, and then we'll go to the English. All right, I'm sorry to stop you.
Lovely.
Please start again.
Yatha yo mam bhavayati phalam mat prapnuyat tatha mamaishvaryam rishigana aparichannamiritam. Whoever thinks of me in whatever manner, so would he obtain the fruit from me. Whatever fruit the devotee thinks the deity can give, he gets that fruit from the deity of that form. Sages, my power is declared as unlimited.
Yes. So, who's right? Those who worship Vishnu, or those who worship Ram, or those who worship Shiva, or those who worship Jesus, or those who worship Allah, or those who worship Yahweh? Which is the way? And what the mother is saying here, she's echoing Lord Krishna in Gita, who says, in whatever way people approach me, so am I to them. So however we understand God, how God will appear to us. So there's stories through history of Christians who have visitations of the Blessed Virgin Mary. I've yet to meet a Hindu who's had a vision or a visitation from the Blessed Virgin Mary. I was talking with a student, and she was going up to near Mount Kailash with a bunch of swamis. And they saw Lord Shiva rise out of the mountain. I've yet to meet a Christian or a Muslim who's had a vision of Lord Shiva. Why? Because it is the human mind that conceives of God in form. Now, it's more than just our form of God that we conceive. We also conceive of the attributes of the infinite. And unfortunately, the way we conceive of those attributes limits our experience of God. One of the sayings I like to share is, look at the way a person prays, and that will tell you what their theology is, what their understanding of God is. Let me give you an example. In the West, most of us are taught a prayer something like this. Oh God, please make Dad give me the car tonight so I can go out with Susie or Bill. And if you do, I promise I'll stop smoking. And in it is a huge misunderstanding of what the mother is saying her nature is. Oh God, please. Do you beg God? Do you have a neurotic God? I love it when you beg, Ganesh. Come on, beg. Makes me feel good. If you don't beg, I'm just going to wipe you out. There's no such God. Then what do we want God to do? Manipulate somebody else. Make Dad give me the car. What makes us think we're smart enough to know what's best for another person? Oh, I pray that Aunt Mary realizes what an awful person she is and changes. Don't we do things like that? We wonder why our prayers don't work when we want God to manipulate other people to suit our needs. So we're going to make God give me the car tonight. I want God to be my errand boy, fulfill my wants and desires. Of course, what am I going to do to get the car? I'm going to go smooch. I feel guilty about that. God doesn't like that. Nonsense. Then the last part, we make a deal with God. I promise to stop smoking. How many people have said, oh, if you heal my mother from cancer, I promise I'll do this many pilgrimages. I'll give up this. I'll become a sannyasi, or I'll become a nun. Trying to bargain or make deals with God. And we wonder why our prayers don't work. It's because of our limited understanding of the infinite. What is the nature of the mother? First of all, it is absolute consciousness, pure existence, pure consciousness, and the source of all joy, Ananda. It's Shakti, its power, the power of the mother, is healing, it is life-changing, it's transformative, it's grace. We can't earn it, we can't deserve it. All we can do is open to it and accept it. What stands in the way? The small self. I, me, mine, gimme, 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 my needs, my wants, my fears, my resentments. That's the stuff that acts like an insulator to this grace of God. So in a sense, it's not like we have to find God, find the self. What we need to do is get rid of all those afflictions, the kleshas, all those defects, the doshas. It's like a deep sea diver who discovers a shipwreck and brings up something that's completely covered with barnacles, knowing that inside there may be something of great value. All that need be done is the removal of the barnacles, the incrustations. Oh my God, it's a beautiful 16th century Spanish cross with gems in it. It's really cool. Just looked like a lump before. So also, inside you and me, at the core of our being, is the divine. And the incrustations are ego in its various forms. Now, when the human mind becomes like a pure lens, and that grace, that Shakti, that power moves through, it has its own intelligence. It knows what to do. Just like when you plant a seed in the ground, you don't have to give a lecture to the seed. It knows how to do its thing to sprout and become a tree. Divine energy knows what it's doing. Our job is get out of the way. All right, next verse.
Anapekshaiva yat kinchit tad aham dvayachinmayi sphuramyanta jagada karane rishipungavaha. Best of sages, I, who am of the nature of non-dual consciousness, shine with the form of the infinite worlds without requiring anything whatever.
So, in yoga, the phenomenal world is not created. It is imagined. And consciousness, which is one without a second, by its own Maya Shakti, by its own illusory power, manifests, projects all these worlds. Now, again, we've done this so many times. This becomes easy to understand if you go to your own direct experience. If you visualize something, if you visualize an elephant, there's a subject-object relationship. But the elephant, there's no second substance. It's just the fabric of your own consciousness appearing as the elephant. That's what an imagination is. Now, when you go to sleep and dream about an elephant, the dream elephant is still imagined. But we have the additional element of ignorance. I do not know I am the waker. I think I am the dreamer. And I think the elephant which appears is real. This is no different. It is like very long dream. Now the mother is doing the dreaming. You and I are characters in the dream, as it were. Any thoughts on this? Next verse.
Tatha spurantyapi sada natye yadvaitachid vapuh etanme mukhyamaishwaryam durghatartha vibhavanam. Though shining in that manner always, I do not leave behind my nature as non-dual consciousness. This is my principal power, manifesting impossible things.
Yes. So Maya, the word the tradition uses to describe the appearance of the worlds, it means universal ignorance. My favorite definition is it describes how the impossible seems possible. How is it that consciousness, which is sthita, it never moves, vijnana ghanam, homogeneous mass, consciousness, seems to have a whole universe appearing? yet it doesn't change. Again, let's go to our direct experience, back to our imagination of the elephant. If, on the contrary, you visualize an almond, and then you visualize the elephant, does it take more of you to visualize an elephant as opposed to an almond? Oh, sorry, can't do an elephant today. I'm 10 quarts me short. No. You can visualize a mountain. You can imagine the moon. You can close your eyes and imagine looking up at the stars. You do not change or alter one bit. Just what you see appears to change. So here the goddess says, even though all these worlds rise and fall, supernovas and black holes and colliding galaxies, and even down to single cells dividing, electrons spinning, she does not move or change. Just like on an individual basis, you do not change, no matter what you imagine. Now, what's the point? The point is what's real, what's Baba being, is yourself. It is the goddess. They're the same thing. And you're safe. Nothing really changes or touches you. Look to your direct experience. Go back over your life. Your body has changed. Your feelings have changed. Your thoughts have changed. Your circumstances have changed. But you are still you. What is your nature? The body, feelings, thoughts. Chidakasha, I am the space, consciousness itself. And that's not only true about me, it's true about everybody. All the terrible death and destruction we hear about in the news in Ukraine right now. It is a fact the bodies are getting blown up. It is a fact that these bodies are dying. It is a fact that people's emotions are suffering terribly. But what's really life itself in these people, pure consciousness, is not touch. The way Krishna says it in Gita, talking about in the 2nd chapter, they are not killed when the body is killed. Weapons cleave it not, fire burns it not, water doesn't wet it, etc. Who the self is birthless, changeless, and deathless. Now, we do not give this teaching to the ignorant or even beginners. They're not ready to hear it. Instead, you say, I'm very sorry for your loss. Is there anything I can do? You have compassion for where they are. But you know, no one dies. Any thoughts? Next verse.
Mamaishvaryam tu rishayah pashyadhvam sukshmaya trisha sarvashraya sarvagata chapyaham kevala sthita. Sages, observe my power with subtle perception. Though the substratum of all and existing in everything, I am remaining alone.
So we have this word kevala or kaivalyam, which means alone. Doesn't mean solitary, like go up into the mountains and live alone. It means there's only one here. It's the same self enlivening all beings. And here she says, observe my power with your subtle mind. What does that mean? We need to let go of grosser thoughts and feelings, meaning we don't have nice thoughts as opposed to bad thoughts. It means we have fewer. We reduce the frequency and the volume of the flow of thoughts that go by. Until we can begin to see what's the substratum, what's the context, who is it who knows the thoughts and even the space between them. With the attentive faculty introverted, notice yourself, the self. Again, you will not see yourself as an object, yet you are not unknown. You're you. One of the words we use for the ego sense is chaya. Chaya means reflection and shadow. So in this context, like a shadow self, what happens when you shine a light on a shadow? Disappears. So the ego sense is an assumed self. Jiva bhavana, the attitude or feeling that I'm a person. And it can only appear to exist when you don't look at it. Very interesting. As long as you're looking at stuff, the phenomenal world seen through the senses, the emotional world seen through the mind, the thought world seen through the subtle intellect, allows me to assume that there's an individual Jim here who's doing all the knowing, who's very unique and special. That's how we all think. But if in a very quiet mind, introvert the attention, Koham, who am I? That false self, that counterfeit self, that shadow self. Falls. See, there's nothing there. Yet that no thingness shines as pure awareness, pure existence. Create it, you don't achieve it, you don't attain it, you don't become it. We realize it. We see that's what I've always really been. I just didn't know it. I look out at the world from my viewpoint. You look out at the world from your viewpoint. I'm aware of my body. You are aware of your body. I'm aware of my feelings. You are aware of your feelings. I'm aware of my thoughts. You're aware of yours. But when I, as it were, look behind my eyes and notice the knower, Shunyata, empty, yet purna, full being, nirupaham, without a form, nirmalam, without any dirt or taint, achalam, never moved, ajatam, unborn, amritam, never die. Self in me is not like the self in you. The self in me is the self in you and is God. Next verse.
Swamayaya samajñatva samsaranti chiradaham bhuyo viditva swatmanam guru shishya padam gata nityamukta punarmukta bhuyo bhavamyaham nirupadana sambharam srijani jagadidrisham. Not knowing myself by my own elusive power, transmigrating or moving through worldly existence for a long time, reaching to the state of the disciple of a guru and knowing my own self again, I, who am ever free, become liberated again repeatedly. I create the world of this kind without the collection of any materials.
Yes. So these bodies, these subtle bodies, these ego senses, and that intellect covered by spiritual ignorance are like the almond or the elephant that you or I have imagined. Seen, but nothing but the mother herself appearing as that. So it is she that manifests as the self of even the most ignorant person. Running around, chasing this, that, and the other thing, more, better, different, more, better, different, more, better, different. Then that person starts to question, what's it all about? And it is she that manifests as the guru when the student is ready. The guru says, have no fear. I will take you on the path to the infinite that the ancients traveled. It's a sure liberation for you. The guru explains the truth as it's found in the scriptures, doesn't change. And the student, Shravanam, hears the truth. Mananam, thinks about it until they're convinced of its truth. And Nididhyasana, long, steady, and continuous meditation. Until, in the white heat of meditation, a moment of pratyabhignana, the moment of recognition, aha. The student goes, oh, duh, it's myself. It's been there all along. All of that is the play of consciousness itself. This whole process is beautifully articulated by the great Sufi master, Ibn Arabi. And he uses the mirror as the great metaphor for the human intellect. And back in the late 1100s, early 1200s, when Ibn Arabi lived, mirrors were not silvered glass. They were polished metal. So you have the metal, and it's dull. It's not polished very well, so you can't see your face in it. Polish and polish and polish and polish. It's like waxing your chrome bumpers till you can see yourself in it. Then you see your face. Now, it is the mother, it is God who's doing the seeing. The mirror is God. So when the mirror has been polished, it's God seeing God, seeing God. Fascinating dynamic. Wonderful thing to meditate on. Any thoughts before we go on? Next verse. Are we still logged on?
Yeah, we are.
Yes.
Everybody's just quiet tonight.
Ityadi santi bahudha mamaishwarya paramparaah natad ganayitum shakyam sahasra vadanena va. Thus and so forth, series of my powers exist variously, that cannot be counted even by the thousand-faced serpent of Vishnu.
So the import of the verse is the way in which the mother manifests in this world, infinite and countless, and it's dynamic. It's always changing with newness all the time. And how she manifests as grace entering into the world for the benefit of the world, for our spiritual unfoldment. that is new, always, and yet always old, ever ancient, ever new, at the same time. The same time. Who would have thought 1,000 years ago that this text would be being studied on Zoom? Never knew. Next verse.
Shrinvantu sangrahat bakshye Madeshwaryasya leshatah Jagadyatra vichitreyam sarvatah samprasarita. Listen, I shall tell you briefly. This varied course of the world is spread everywhere through a little of my power.
Yes. So here she's echoing what Krishna says in Gita, in one small corner of my infinite being, one teeny tiny little itty bitty corner is the whole cosmos. The cosmos is infinite, but it's just this small portion in the greater infinitude of awareness itself. And of course, physics is now telling us this isn't the only universe. They're talking about multiverses. Are you up on this sort of stuff, Uday? Can you tell us about it?
Well, it's not directly the area that I work in, but as far as I understand it, it is not yet something which can be tested in the lab. So it remains, the multiverse theory has remained a theory for a while, but there's no way to tell whether it's actually true.
But it can be mathematically described, can it?
Right. Mathematically, several such universes you can postulate them, but they remain conjectures at this point.
Of course, I always wonder, because I'm a simple-minded guy, where does everything go when it goes into a black hole, into a singularity?
Yeah, that's another good one.
Yeah. But the point being, now what we have in Sanskrit, we've got the word loka. Loka comes from it means worlds or people, literally. And most people think of it as different planes of existence and stuff like that. But there are schools in Hinduism who really think it's other planets.
Yeah.
Who's to say? Who's to say? But the whole point of the verse is all these various lokas. If there are multiverses, all of them take up just one small portion of the mother's infinite being. Going on, next verse.
Mama jnanam bahuvidam dvaita dibhedatah parapara vibhedacha bahudha chapi tat phalam. My knowledge is of many kinds on account of its division into the dual, the non-dual, and the rest. Its fruit is also various due to its difference as the highest or direct or the lower or indirect.
So what she's saying here is there is knowledge of the infinite, the perfect, the real, and then there's the knowledge of this world. And in this world, there are many schools of philosophy. People who endeavor to try to understand truth. Using logic, many other tools of the mind. She calls all of these indirect. Term I like to use is paroksha jnana, indirect knowledge, theoretical. Ultimately, you get this from hearing the scriptures, from the words of the Buddha. But it's through our own abhyasa, practice, and vairagya, renunciation. We're able to renounce the mind itself. That we have aparoksha jnana, direct experience. And the great insight of the Mahatma, the person who's had this, is not aham Mahatma, I'm a Mahatma now. Aham Muni, I'm a wise person. Aham Mucky Muck. No. Aham Brahmasmi. Oh. I'm the very ground of being of the universe. No personal sense of self is real. So this she's calling the direct knowledge. Going on.
Dvaita jnanam tu vividham dvitiya lambanam yatah dhyanameva tu tat proktam swapnarajyadi sammitam. Dual knowledge is diverse since it has a second as its support. That alone is called meditation or contemplation, which is equal or similar to the kingdom of a dream and the like.
So Dvaita Jnana, dualistic knowledge, which is typified by I, the individual, know something. It can be I know the couch, I know the pillow, perception. It can be I know mathematics, I know Sanskrit, I know all the Vedas, I know Bhagavad Gita, I've studied it many, many times. I know the theory of non-dualism. This is still Dvaita, dualistic knowledge. And it's diverse. I've been asked to give a talk on Bhagavad Gita next month at a Catholic church, believe it or not. And what's going to be interesting is I'm thinking of bringing several different copies of the Gita. There's the one done by A.C. Swami Bhaktivedanta Prabhupada, the guy who founded ISKCON, the Hare Krishna guy.
Yeah.
Then there's Ramunaja, there's his Gita. There's Shankara's translation. There's the modern one, Swamiji's translation. There's Nikolananda. There's There's Christopher Isherwood did a very good one in English with no commentary. So they all seem to differ. Why is that? Because if a person has not had the direct experience of the infinite, they can only speak from the experience that they've had. What is the difference between the dualist mystic, the Visitations, the qualified non-dualist mystic like Ramanuja, excuse me, and the Advaita vision like Shankara, has to do with the level of experience. If you still see God as other, that's real for you. If you, like Ramanuja, feel I'm the drop and God's the ocean, that's the qualified non-dual vision. Or the deepest Advaita, God alone is, there's no otherness. Here the goddess is saying, when you have that final Advaita experience, it's different than the qualified dualist experiences. Any thoughts on this? Let's see if I can give a worldly example. When you're dreaming and you dream that you're riding a horse, to the dreamer, the horse is real. If you were to have a philosophical discussion within the dream, does the horse exist or not? You'd say, of course the horse exists. Then you wake up, dream's gone. From that viewpoint, was the horse in the dream real? Well, it was a real experience. But it didn't really exist, no. All depends on what level we're talking about. All right, next verse.
Tachapi saphalam neyam niyatya niyatam yatah aparam chapi vividham tatra mukhyam tadevahi. Even that contemplation should be known as fruitful, since it is controlled by destiny or the fixed law of God. Though inferior knowledge is varied, the principal one, there is that alone described. Note, the reference is to the form of Tripura, described in verses 36, 37, and 38.
So what methodology should we take in preparation for the study of the highest wisdom? Here the reference is to the Karma Kanda, which is probably the Sri Vidya tradition. That's what I've come to think that it probably is. Ganesh is one of the few people I know who's actually been trained in that. But from a larger perspective, does this mean that being a good Christian, being a good Muslim, being a good Hindu from a ritualistic standpoint, all these things are not of value? No, she's saying they are of value because all of them are part of our destiny. It's what we are meant to do at this particular level of our unfoldment. Remember The bud is not a failure as a bloom. The bud is the bud in its perfect state. In its time, it will open. You can't force it. You see the rosebud first come up, say, oh, I want to bloom, and you start pulling on the rose petals. You just do nothing but trash the rose. Where we're supposed to be. Exactly. Any thoughts on this? This is why the real yogi has no trouble with any other religion or school of thought. They all serve their purpose. That's why the yogi can say, I'm a Muslim, I'm a Hindu, a Jew, Christian. Because none of the schools of religion are it. Avyapadesham, it's untalkaboutable. Next verse.
Prokta mukhya paramadhyanam. Prokta mukhya paramayadhyanam. Prokta mukhya paramaha adhyanam mukhya phalakramam advaita vijnanameva paravijnanamiritam. The meditation on the form consisting of the principle among the inferior ones described is the regular course or method for the acquisition of the chief fruit, like purity of the mind, which leads to knowledge. The non-dual knowledge alone is declared as the highest knowledge.
So we start with what's knowable, with these various rituals, these various spiritual practices. Then it matures into what we call Atma Vichara, direct investigation into the nature of the self. Who am I? What is this world and how has it come about? That's what reveals the truth. The image I like to use, we have the mountain of truth and the number of paths up that mountain. Some are very windy roads. Some are very difficult. In my opinion, the Advaita Vedanta is the most direct. It's only for the subtlest people. On top of the mountain is the temple of truth. But it's only got one door. Aham, I. If you want to find out what's real, find out who you are. Is there any other way? No. Now, it can be named in other ways. You can love God until you disappear and God alone remains. Same thing. Only the preliminary practices differ. In the end, is exactly the same teaching that the mother has put forward in this text. Any thoughts on this? All right, next verse.
Mamanaradhya paramam chiram vidyam tu Srimatim katham prapyeta paramam vidyamadvaita sangikam. But without worshipping for a long time, me, the supreme Vidya or knowledge, possessed of majesty and grace, how can one obtain the supreme knowledge named non-duality, or the one without a second?
Yes. So here she is saying that the preliminary activity is the worship of Sri Vidya, meaning knowledge itself. Now it is an actual tradition. Can you share with us a bit about what the structure, what the nature of it is? Because you've had some study in it, Ganesh.
Yeah, it's basically, I think the philosophy is pretty similar at the end of the day. It's the non-dual vision, but it's structured around the Sri Chakra, right, which is a cosmic diagram. And essentially you're trying to ascend the different levels of the Sri Chakra and go to the center, which is the Bindu, which is the same as non-dual light or consciousness. So you remove all the coverings. They're called avaranas, which is coverings. So it's essentially removing ignorance, and you then end up at the center.
Yes. And practically speaking, does it involve things like moving energy, visualizations? What is it? What is the actual practice, the meditative practices? What are they? Can you describe them, or are they secret?
No, it just depends on the tradition. For some, it's like external ritualistic practices. For others, it's internal meditative practices. There can be mantras involved. There can be yantras involved. It just depends on the tradition.
Yes. So this is a very ancient and rich tradition, even though you were in Chennai when you learned it, right?
No, I was in Andhra Pradesh.
Andhra Pradesh. But many people think its origin is actually up in Kashmir. But where it originates, who knows? But what she said, if you go back to the very beginning of the book, this Sri Vidya tradition is the karma kanda. It is the ritualistic or the worship portion, the upasana, which prepares the mind for the knowledge. This text is the jnana kanda. In my basic art of meditation class, the metaphor I use, it's like cutting a tomato. So if you have a big ripe tomato and you have a dull knife and you try to cut it, it'll squish the tomato. So the preparatory exercise, sharpen the knife. So for example, in the Raja Yoga tradition, that would be all the various limbs of Raja Yoga, just another system. That's all it is. When the knife is sharp, then you can easily slice the tomato. Problem is, too many people think that it's all about the knife sharpening. And you can sharpen and sharpen and sharpen the knife. And that will not give you freedom. Then we have to engage in inquiry into the nature of the self with the wonder sword of knowledge that's sharpened. In the Christian tradition, we have the exegesis on the story of Mary and Martha. Martha symbolizes what they call in the monastic traditions the active life. Your prayer work, going to mass, working in the fields, or copying scriptures or stuff like that. This rubs off your ego. Then you're ready for the contemplative life, the meditation. It's pretty universal. Any thoughts about this? How many more verses in this section? Quite a few?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, we'll do a few more. We have 5 more minutes.
तदेवाद्वैत विज्ञानम केवला या पराचितिः तस्या शुद्ध दशामर्षो द्वैतामर्षाभिभावकः. That alone is non-dual knowledge, which is mere supreme consciousness, close contact or direct realization of the pure state of that consciousness is what overcomes the contact of duality.
Yes. So how do I destroy ignorance? Knowledge destroys ignorance. This is not information kind of knowledge. How do I finally grasp the fundamental unreality of the jiva bhavana, the personal sense of self? It's when I have the direct experience that that's false, that that's transient, that it's like a shadow, but something there is around the being. It's real. Chidananda Rupa. Shankara says, my form is bliss consciousness. Now, we've talked a little bit about this. The real knowledge with a capital R. What is the instrument for knowing that? The self is self-evident. How do you know you are you? You don't see, hear, taste, touch, or smell yourself. You don't emote yourself. You don't think yourself. Descartes said, I think, therefore I am. He never tried quitting thinking. In the deepest meditation, the thoughting ceases. But something remains that sees the presence and absence of thought, the presence and absence of egoism. It is never known as an object, but it is never unknown. That's the only real knowledge there is. The great cosmic joke is everybody already has that. But in the human mind, we're stupid. We just don't get it. All right. What verse are we on for next week?
56.
56. All right. Have a great Easter for those of you who celebrate it. Have a good Passover for those of you who celebrate that. And the rest of you just have a good weekend.
Thank you so much.
Oh, Adrian, how did you do with it? Stay online.
It was lovely. It was lovely. Thank you so much.
Stay online a bit after we finish. I'm going to do one more chant. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Sri Guru Pyo Namaha. Hari Om. Om.
Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Jim. Good night.